Salam, everybody, and welcome again to yet another journey of this new version of Al Keblan Historical Traces under the Karinga concept, principle, and values and tradition. This time we're looking at the Gospel of Mark in relation to the holy month of Christians, Jews, and Muslim. This month of April. And so, like we said, we are looking at Mark for several reasons, and I'm going to elaborate at the tail end of this presentation the historical background and why I chose Mark. It is very important now, after the third prediction of the death or the passion of Christ, and seeing where the apostles were in terms of believing, in terms of understanding this kingdom mission and kingdom version. It is important to note that Jesus had a dwelling place in Capernaum. And so whenever he talks about the foxes and birds have a place to have nest and a place to dwell, he talks about this in his last days as he leaves Capernaum towards Caesarea Philippi and towards Jerusalem. Indeed, he doesn't have a home here. And this is when, like you remember, I mentioned early in other versions that Mark becomes a very important figure in Jerusalem. And so this is where Jesus will celebrate his Last Supper, and the apostles are going to have an abode after the death of Jesus Christ and after his ascension till the day of Pentecost, and probably even after the day of Pentecost. And so, and true to that, now they have a place where they can move now from and establish the church in Jerusalem and now start moving outside Jerusalem. Because again, like Jesus had predicted, Jerusalem will not be there. And so when he said he's going to come soon, the idea of the kingdom was established, and for it now to stand, Jerusalem and the temple had to go. And this did not all go well with the Orthodox Jews, the people who represented the Judean kingdom, the Palestinian Judean Jews. And these are the people who were very much famous because of the temple, because to them the temple was what was to bring humanity back to God. All right, and that's why they had a Gentile space in the temple. But as you will see, when Jesus will go to Jerusalem, he's going to correct all that, because they were exorbitantly pricing the objects of services, the elements of services at a skyrocketed price, and it was part of their mission to bring the whole world back together. But in terms of policies and mechanisms that were laid by the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the high priest, they were denying people this opportunity by charging them expensively. And so I want us to look at the last mission of Jesus before he enters Jerusalem. He went to the Samaritans, and of course he had taught about a good neighbor, and he shows a Samaritan is a good neighbor, because according to the Jews, the 10 commandments, a neighbor meant your fellow Jew, and a non-Jew was never your neighbor, he was your enemy. And that's why they were, even in the temple, their space was in the periphery. You had first to go through the court of the Gentiles in the temple of Jerusalem, so that you can go to the holy place of the Jews, and then the Holy of Holies. And this is what the torn veil will mean that now that separation of the holy people of God and the others is going to end. And of course, also it will represent the holiness and the idea of an atonement that was done by the high priest once a year is going to come to an end. And Jesus becomes the lamb whose blood is going to cleanse the whole humanity once and for all, and his death is going to be the last for the people who died in the old order. And so, very important that when Jesus visited Samaria, it was a moment of reconciliation between the Jews from Judea, and the Jews who had intermarried with people after the exile in the by the Assyrians, and they settled a place, like I said, called Samaria, and so this is where they get their name from. And so the Judeans again were captured like around 70 years later, and they were taken to Babylon. And for them, they were able to maintain. They maintained, and they never intermarried. And those who did were excommunicated from the community. But they were able to come back during the time of priest Ezra, and they rebuilt the temple, which was now later destroyed by the Solomonic temple was destroyed during the captivity by the Babylonians, and again they were liberated from the Babylonians by the Persians. And I want you to understand the Babylonians are today the people whom we call the Iraq. Iraq was Babylon. That was the old name, and the old name of Iran was Persia. So Persia liberated the Jews from the Iraqis, and the Iranians allowed the Jews to go back, and that's why these it is very important for us to study the history of Iraq, Israel, and Iran, so that we may be able to understand where these resentments came from. And because these are very historical people, and they teach their history to their children, and that's why they are able to carry on the grudges and also the favors of the past into the future. Probably not a good thing to do, but it is worth studying that, so that we can be able to continue with the mission of ecumene, or the household of God, like it has been demonstrated in this month of holy services and holy dedication of humanity to God. Now, Samaritans lived west of River Jordan, and they were very hostile to the Jews because they were banished from the temple, and so they had to have an alternative worshiping place. And remember, the Samaritans, or the people from Israel, this is the kingdom of Israel. They were the majority. The people who had the temple and the seat of the king after the kingdom of David and Solomon divided into two. So Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, was left with around 2.5 tribes, and Jeroboam, who was the general. And this thing is seen. You look at the independence of African countries. It was during a Cold War, and most of the people who were preferred by the nation, and the people, had to be either aligned to the Americans or to the Russians. And those who aligned to the Russians knew that they never wanted to be part of the Western Empire, a Western Empire that was patronizing them, that had oppressed them through the church and through politics. and had stolen from them to enrich themselves. And so they had seen that we would want to go the Russian direction because Russians are more or less like us. They are struggling and they stand for who they are, and they don't want to be part of the Western civilization and Western empire. And so the Americans were still very powerful and they had a hand in Africa. They are also very close to Africa, and so they had already installed a lot of their people in these independent governments. And of course, the Americans were working with the Britons and the French and the German and the Portuguese and the Belgians who were colonizing Africa. And so it was easy for them. If a prime minister was installed before they became the president, they had to show their allegiance. And if you showed your allegiance against the West, you were assassinated. And this is the case of Patrice Lumumba, people like Steve Biko, though he was not yet there as a political leader, but he was on his way as a very prolific and vibrant lawyer. People like Thomas Sankara, and so on and so forth. A lot of founding fathers who were genuinely bona fide leaders naturally and divinely were removed. And this is what we see Americans doing even today, and the Britons. They do a regime change. And it is unfortunate that now we are seeing the war of between Russia and Ukraine, because Ukraine had an agreement with Russia that they are going to stick together and continue fighting for the identity and the freedom of their people. But unfortunately, this realization was also coming very slow because the population is growing. A lot of American businesses are around, so Americanism was being internationalized so quickly. All these technologies had influence of the American, and so as generation came by, they never really cared about these agreements. And so you look at the president of Ukraine, he's a young guy, and so he needs to move away from this. He wants people to get money, he wants people to get a good job and good life, and this can only come from the Americans. And so this is why the war of Ukraine is there. It was the same. So these people, after the division of the two kingdoms, the bona fide leader was Rehoboam. Jeroboam was a general in the military of Solomon, and so they rejected Rehoboam and they took Jeroboam. So probably the Americans are within the biblical paradigm. And so Mark tells us in chapter 3 that James and John were surnamed Boanerges. Boanerges meaning thunder, sons of thunder. And so Rehoboam was seen as a son of thunder, but unfortunately this never materialized. If you read 1 King chapter 2, 2 Kings chapter 1, you will find that this was the nickname given to the Israelites. They were sons of thunder, and especially the people who were seen to continue with the lineage of David. And so the Jews called Samaritans seen as people who deviated from the truth, and people who went to become heretic. And so they are seen as not the sons of God anymore. But Jesus is talking about them in a very genuine way of human understanding. And this again is something that the church fell into when churches started looking at people as you have gone to the Roman Catholic, so you cease being an Orthodox Christian and you are excommunicated. You are a Catholic Christian, you've gone to the Orthodox tradition, so you cease being, you excommunicated. You went from our church and you went to the Pentecostal, the Protestants, Evangelical, and so on, and the new mushrooming churches. So you cease being one of us. This thing is still there even today, unfortunately. And so this idea of people looking at their differences other than their similarities for the unity of the household of God, so that we can cultivate and share in the love of God. People end up being resentful, people holding grudges, and well, the decision of the people who hold offices at a certain point of history, either in governments or in churches or in business sector, it depends with their understanding of humanity. Otherwise, if we are going to gravitate towards an individualism, individualistic, or what the Americans brought to us, that is called the personality, the personality context of you being great, you being the first, you being the best. If that is the direction that we are going to continue taking, it is really a bad and a sad thing. And so Jesus gives the parable of the Levite and the priest and the guy who was beaten up by robbers, robbed of everything and left for dead. And then the Samaritan comes and takes care of this guy. He shows that this is a good neighbor. And so even Gentiles are good neighbors. You remember the conversation between the Canaanite woman and Jesus in terms of requesting Jesus to heal her daughter. And he sees the faith of the Gentiles. He looks at the centurion, Roman soldier, and he sees the faith of these people. And he says, definitely, these people have much more faith than my people, the Jews. And so the kingdom departs from the Jews and goes to the rest of the world, the Jews included, the Gentiles included, and so on and so forth. And so the people of Israel, or the Samaritans, found an alternative place for worshipping, and because they were half castes, they had to rebuild a place of worship, and they went to Mount Gerizim, and this is where they settled. And I think this is where also Jesus met the Samaritan woman, and they had a discussion on the well of Jacob. And Jesus sees another amazing faith, a woman who accepts humbly her faults or her shortcomings of the life that she knew was a life out of her misery, the life that today we condone, of young girls having sponsors, and now the sponsors have been given different names. You find it is said that girls have different sponsors. There is the sponsor who pays the house rent, the sponsor who pays her education, the sponsor who sponsors their kids, the sponsor who helps their family back at home. But these sponsors don't know that they do that. They know that they are just taking care of their lovers, but they don't know that there are many. They have been lined up and they have been segmented in terms of the needs. And so Jesus looks at his ministry like that ministry of Jonah towards the Ninevites. And so he goes to the Samaritans, he goes to the Gentiles. Him being a Jew from Judea, the southern kingdom, he becomes a very good example of you can come from the rightful tradition, but you don't become exclusive. So it is an idea of inclusivity. And so we will come to the end of that segment. By and by, we shall be looking at other themes. Now, the themes of Holy Week, because I believe the Roman Catholic and the Western Rite tradition, which includes the evangelical, the Pentecostal, and the Protestants or the Reformers, are going to be celebrating their Easter very soon. And next week it's going to be their Holy Week. And so this at least will be a journey that we'll journey with them. And then the last 2 weeks, we are going to look at the intrigue of the, the, the prosecution and the crucifixion of Jesus with the guys from the Eastern traditions. So thank you. Remember, we do this so that we can be able to understand ourselves, understand our roots, our purpose, and also to surge forward in bearing good fruits. Let us be humble, let us be kind, and let us be prayerful in this holy month. And pray for this world to be a united world. Pray for people to understand, though it is bad to balkanize people in this democratic space, but people need to have a background, even if they want to push for their personal worldview, their personal culture, as it has been taught by the Western civilization. There is no problem as long as we come from a common understanding. God bless.